When we approach art in the public sphere, we're actually approaching a question. Why is this here? How does it shape my relationship to my everyday and to my community and to my notion of what's valuable and what's not in the world?
You actually reconsider everything in the city anew. You think of it all in a new way because of seeing that piece.
There's something that happens in the context of a place where everyone can go freely and openly. That's important.
I have loved walking around the city on a beautiful day, watching people's aha moment when they see a great work of art outside. They laugh or they go near it to have a closer look.
Showing the work in public space kind of saves it from being like a precious object. It has kids touching it and dogs sniffing it and rain falling on it.
You're giving it to the public. You know, it is your work, but you're kind of relinquishing ownership, certainly control, and it becomes what they make it.
When we look at the history of the Public Art Fund, the diversity of the interventions shows that there is a great commitment to, I would say, a deeper sort of belief in what does art offer society.
I think they've redefined what public art can be. They've opened up a lot of space for playful curiosity and rigor and asking questions of society and of the public in the form of art.
The idea that people can be exposed to artworks every day of their lives is the reason that I'm involved with Public Art Fund. It's the reason that Public Art Fund is so successful and really makes a difference in the city.
It's public art. It's free.
If there are questions, if there's a public outcry, we know how the public can be angry at art, which I think is fantastic. I mean, the world is crumbling around us, and you put a piece up on Park Avenue, and thousands of letters go to the mayor. What are you spending money on this stuff for? Exactly. Okay, that's all right. It is causing an emotional response for some reason, and art has always done that. Throughout history, art has raised a fury of emotion.
In 1977, two pioneering public art organizations, SandenWolff and the Public Arts Council, merged to become the Public Art Fund. And my mother, Doris Friedman, was the president of both. She was energized when she saw the skyline. She believed that everyone deserved to be exposed to art, as well as this notion that giving artists an opportunity to use the city as their canvas could change the way the city looked and felt.
1977 was a very fertile moment. Artists were thinking outside the box, outside the white cube. And organizations like Public Art Fund emerged to connect that new kind of way of making art with audiences who would then have the opportunity to experience it. Since Doris Friedman founded the organization, those two things remain a constant. Artists continue to innovate, and audiences continue to seek these kinds of experiences.
I think one of the great things about the Public Art Fund's sense of access is that it provides connections to communities that might not necessarily be going to buy a ticket to look at art. And that is the nature of culture. It just is. It's not something you go to see specifically. I mean, culture is what we are the products of and what we produce.
I think it's incredibly important to have organizations like the Public Art Fund who facilitate this dialogue. It's not just about what they say, it's actually hosting the space in which these dialogues can take place. And that's actually not very easy.
It's not about the permanence, it's about the experience and the way it can make you feel. The art does create a dialogue, and the dialogue's what it's all about.
When I think of any kind of important public artwork that I've seen or known about in the city, it turns out it was Public Art Fund who commissioned it.
One of the iconic images that we have now of Lower Manhattan is Agnes Dennis's wheat field in what's now Battery Park City. One might think of Felix Gonzalez Torres creating his untitled billboard right opposite the Stonewall Inn. Or Messages to the Public, which was a real turning point in thinking about how digital technology could be used in the public sphere by artists.
Tony Ursler's was probably the first project that I realized was a public art fund project. I mean, that fist slamming onto the MetLife building was pretty incredible.
It's Barbara Kruger wrapping a bus, Lawrence Weiner creating manhole covers,
Jeff Koons at Rockefeller Center,
Sol LeWitt's structures, Francis Alice's modern procession, when MoMA was closing temporarily and moving to Queens. The idea of a kind of ceremonial procession conducted and conceived by an artist was a very beautiful and powerful idea.
There have been pieces that have been great spectacles, like the Ugo Rodinone, where, all of a sudden Stonehenge in the middle of Manhattan. Or Anish Kapoor turned your world upside down and inside out.
One of the fantastic things about working in the context of a city like New York is that the opportunities are, if not infinite, certainly expansive. When you think of all of the different boroughs, all of the different topographies and landscapes and public spaces, artists like Alejandro Diaz, Xavier Simmons.
One of my favorite projects, which you can still find relics of in Long Island City, is by Richard Dion, which gives you directions to the cultural institutions that are nearby. Martin Wong did a wonderful program with us near the School for the Deaf, where he created stop signs in the manual alphabet. Janet Cardiff did a wonderful walk through Central Park.
Interactivity was also a key aspect of Jeppe Hein's installation, whether it was seeing yourself reflected in the mirrored labyrinth, or sitting on one of his amazing park benches, or running into appearing rooms, through to Martin Creed's Understanding, almost a plea for something that I think is urgently needed in the world right now.
The Andy Monument by Rob Pruitt was one of these great examples of an artwork that generates spontaneous responses. People would leave Campbell soup cans on the base of the sculpture, and on his birthday bring balloons.
Sarah Z's piece in Doris Friedman Plaza, Liz Larner, Franz West, just pieces that sort of dance in one's imagination.
When you have artists who are challenging us to rethink what we already know in the ways that I could say David Hammonds or Amanda Ross Ho or so many other artists have within the context of the Public Art Fund, it leaves an impact, and I think hopefully allows us to be more open to new ideas when they come to us in different forms.
Rachel White Reed's Water Tower really signaled a shift for us, because it's when we began working on projects that were really unprecedented in size and scope and ambition in many ways, and for which the city had no permission process. No one had wanted to put a piece of art on a rooftop before. I would say that water tower probably opened the door for the waterfalls and for Tatsunishi, and to do unheard of things like flood a section of disused track in the Canal Street subway station and have gondolas in it.
The commissioning process is a very different thing than the purchasing process, which is what a museum does. The museum knows what they're getting. We don't always know what we're getting. It's always a surprise, and sometimes those surprises are revelatory. They're something that has gone way past what you'd ever expect.
I had never made public art, I had never made sculpture that big, and I had never done live performance, and I had never worked with people besides me. It was the most transformational experience that I've had artistically. because it pushed me out of doing this thing that was comfortable that a lot of artists do. You know, we get comfortable in a certain way of making work. But it also opened up this huge, huge new possibility for me that I'm still really invested in.
When you see a public art piece, you know, it's the city, it's the workers who take care of that space, it's the government, it's the public, it's safety. The Public Art Fund is pretty fearless and completely committed to taking this on.
Being around for 40 years creates 40 years worth of relationships, and that's with city agencies, that's with fabricators, that's with engineers. Our role in developing projects goes from casting director, implementer, horticulturalist. We're always wearing many different hats that allow us to do things that otherwise would be impossible.
We allow artists to dream.
On our 40th anniversary, we were looking at creating projects that only the Public Art Fund could do.
Welcome to Commercial Break.
Screens have become ubiquitous in our lives.
Thinking about all the data that is playing everywhere in the city, thinking that that has been hacked by artists, I think is like a kind of cool idea.
I think this show is an amazing reminder to continually sort of question these things that are ever present in our lives.
The title of the piece, Open House, refers to the real estate market, thinking about the question of who has access not only to these rarefied spaces, but to any form of private space in general. The piece, for me, as much as it is about the past, is intended to reflect on the future and to think about what kind of city do we want New York to be in the next century.
We live in a time when the symbolic object in public space is no longer relevant. We don't have a triumphant arch or the great hero on the horse or whatever else it is. We've got to reinvent those things. One of the things I'm interested in is a certain kind of communal space. So this is not just a matter of an object on display. Taking part in a communal event is an important part of what this work is enunciating.
I like to think that there's a kind of layer to my work that is democratic in the way it can be seen and understood. And the best place to really kind of make it alive is to embed it into the environment, because you cannot just look at the sculpture and forget about the world. The world is constantly present around each work.
Ai Weiwei's extraordinary citywide exhibition is really the culmination of Public Art Fund's 40th anniversary year. Weiwei had been seeing fences at refugee camps, at border sites all over the world, and he really wanted to develop a sculptural language that could bring that into the context of New York City.
Public art provides a platform for people consciously or unconsciously to be involved. I think we should use the city as a strong instrument to change the environment of the public life, to form attention to certain issues.
People say to me, what's next? And I say, part of the thrill of what we do is not knowing what's next, because we haven't met that next artist who's going to do that next unimaginable work.
I hope that we continue to be an organization that's very responsive to art and artists, to achieve that kind of bridging between the artist and the audience that really is at the core of what we do.
Having done this for 40 years successfully, I think it says that the next 40, next 400 years that there will be hopefully a lot more open doors and open minds and space in the public to be challenged, to be amused, to be fulfilled and entertained.
We need institutions like Public Art Fund to help make work that needs to be made and that people deserve to see.
Public Art Fund has become a very good example how the art can serve the city and be an important force for cultural movement.
And have a wish, and that is that we will continue to make amazing interventions in public space, claiming back and giving this space to the people who live in it.
This is just an impromptu haiku for the Public Art Fund. What mystic forces shake our earth and minds awake, speak to this shared life?
One of the biggest things that in New York I notice and I think is a problem is just that we're so consumed into our jobs. So seeing stuff like this kind of like gets you out of that.
Public art opens up your world and your mind.
I think that it just stimulates your imagination.
And hopefully it then creates the urge to discuss that with someone.
It educates people, creates a community.
It gives them food for thought.
Public art is completely essential. It adds care and attention to neighborhoods that need it.
When art is for everyone, it's not a commodity anymore. It becomes part of the city.
It's just another reason to love New York.
It's what gives us fuel for our fire to build and create and overcome.
That's what the Public Art Fund is about.
Happy 40th birthday, Public Art Fund. Clearly you've had some great work done because you don't look a day over 30.